Okay, welcome to another retro movie review, and this one is for 1999's The Mummy. It's 25 years old and I cannot believe that. It just feels like yesterday I was watching this film for the first time on VHS, and as part of its 25th anniversary it's been re-released in cinemas, and I managed to catch a showing of it the other night. I was really looking forward to checking this movie out on the big screen, because when the movie first came out, I only ever watched it on VHS. I never actually got the opportunity to watch it at the cinema. So I really wanted to check this out on the big screen. And it's one of those movies that holds a special place in my heart, due to the time that it came out, the age that I was, and I just remember really enjoying it at the time. And I had a lot of fun with this film, and it's been a while since I've watched the movie. But yeah, I thought I would do a retro review of 1999's The Mummy, directed by Stephen Sommers and starring Rachel Weisz and Brendan Fraser. And for those that haven't watched the movie before, The Mummy follows adventurer Rick O'Connell as he travels to Hamunaptra, the city of the dead, with librarian Evelyn Carnahan and her older brother Jonathan, where they accidentally awaken Imhotep, a cursed high priest with supernatural powers. And so I managed to catch this at a screening at my local cinema the other night, and do you know what? I enjoyed this movie just as much as I enjoyed it back when I was 9 years old, watching it on VHS for the first time, and countless other times afterwards through my teenage years. This movie was so much fun. Like, I had such a fun time revisiting this movie again on the big screen. It was a blast, and I just couldn't help but enjoy every moment of it. Yes, a lot of that is nostalgia, but it is a fun movie. It's an entertaining film, and it never stops. It's got this very kind of relentless energy behind it, which I think Stephen Sommers is really known for with his movies, especially with Van Helsing, for example, which is one of my guilty pleasures. But it was also like a brand new experience for me watching this on the big screen for the first time, especially when it comes to the sound effects. Like, I was hearing sounds and noises that I'd never even heard before, so in many ways it was almost like a brand new experience. And the reason why I feel this movie works for me, even to this day, is because it knows what it is. It's very self-aware, it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it embraces that, whether it be for the writing, the direction, the performances. This movie knows what it is, and tonally it works really well. And I just love how they brought this world to life. You know, you got such a mix of different styles of filmmaking when it comes to sort of, you know, the technical aspect, whether it be CGI, actually on sets, and on location, and you've just got a really beautiful blend of different types of filmmaking. And I just love, you know, just for the way in which a lot of this movie was shot, you could clearly see that this was a love letter to those classic 40s, 50s swashbuckler, adventure, romance movies. This is a clear homage or a love letter to those types of movies, just from the way in which this film is shot. Like, for example, you've got some really sort of beautiful moments with our characters riding on these camels through the desert, sort of on their way to Hamunaptra, and it's a great moment. And it's, you know, these moments have so much weight behind them and authenticity, due to the fact that they're shot on location and that it's also shot on film. It adds so much character to the movie, and just the way in which these scenes would play out with the grand epic sweeping score by Jerry Goldsmith just really help elevate those moments in terms of scope. And the entire movie has this kind of sense of humour that really kind of reminded me of an Indiana Jones movie. It had a kind of very Spielberg kind of humour about it, and it works really well into the overall narrative, into the overall sort of adventure and story that these characters are on, and so it doesn't feel out of place when it does happen. The way that the humour is implemented, even though it's silly at times, it works really well within the overall story and aesthetic and narrative of the movie. And like, you'll get these little moments, for example, with Brendan Fraser's character tying rope around a pillar and hitting this other guy with this rope as he's tying it. And it's so simple, but I love it. For me, it really works, this kind of humour. And then the humour does a really good job, sort of, with that tone, sort of levitating kind of from the moments of horror. Because the horror within this movie, those small moments of horror that we do get, are quite effective. Like for a 12 movie, I can imagine, you know, rewinding and watching this again back when I was a kid. You know, they're quite creepy, and I thought they well done. And again, sort of took me back to that kind of the horror that you would find in a Spielberg movie. And I just love the way in which the horror was shot within this film. Again, taking me back to 40s and 50s sort of classic horror movies. And you could just tell through the way in which Stephen Sommers sort of directs and sort of brings to life these moments of horror that he is a massive fan of those classics. Because it's just done through the way in which he decides to shoot these moments, which I thought were very well done. You know, when you've got the close-up sort of the eyes of this person sort of panicking and realising that this creature is behind him and all of that, it kind of really took me back to those classic horror movies from the 40s and the 50s. And for me, this movie is a good example of 90s movies that were transitioning from that heavy reliance on practical effects and relying more on CGI. And I found this movie to be a much more fascinating experience now, due to sort of really kind of picking up and noticing all those different elements, from practical creatures to sort of actually being on set, to sort of the actual use of creating CGI characters. And then you've got moments where actual stuntmen on set are being torched on fire. And I just found that it was a really nice blend. It was a very kind of balanced blend of using these different styles and types of filmmaking, different tools to bring this world to life. And I found it more fascinating now than I ever did back when I was a kid. I mean, as a kid, this movie was just pure escapism, and I really, really enjoyed it. But sort of really looking back on it now, I found myself appreciating this movie in a new way, from a new perspective. I will mention a minor gripe. A very, very minor gripe. I do feel like in moments they relied too heavily on CGI. Like Imhotep, for example, I mean, looks good, to be honest with you, still now to this day. I mean, you know, even at the time, I remember watching it at the time and thinking, wow. But I really do think, they should have relied more when it came to the main creature more heavily on practical. But that's just a bit of a nitpick from me, really. But it was a bit of a frustrating one, because then you'd have his sort of servants and they would all be mostly practical. And I'm like, oh, why didn't they just stick with that? But that's just sort of my minor gripe. From what I remember of Mummy Returns, they do rely a hell of a lot more on CGI, but that's another review for another time. And I just have to touch on the score by Jerry Goldsmith, one of my favourite composers alongside John Williams, and I feel like he does a beautiful job here with the music in capturing those kind of the vibe of those classic adventure, romance, horror movies from the 40s and the 50s. He does such a good job at bringing that kind of era of film to life through the music, especially in moments like I referenced earlier on, with sort of when our characters are on camels, sort of riding through the desert, heading towards Hamunaptra. And it's in those moments where his music just really comes to life. It's grand, it's epic, it's sweeping. And yeah, it's one of my favourite scores, to be honest with you. I've always adored the soundtrack to The Mummy. And all the cast are great. Brendan Fraser is great at Chris O'Connell. And you got Rachel Weisz, who's also really, really good here. And I just, the performances come across like they're really embracing what it is they're doing and just having a load of fun. And I just couldn't help but really enjoy this movie. I do want to touch on one certain moment before I give my rating. And it's a moment where we're introduced to Rachel Weisz's character in the library. And she's on this ladder, sort of putting books away. And that entire moment kind of really encapsulates what I adored about this film. Sort of from the kind of the humour to just how the scene plays out. Like, it has a very kind of classic Steven Spielberg type of humour to it, especially within this moment. But also, when you've got the bookshelves falling down around the character, it kind of made me really miss the way movies used to be made. Like, if you had that scene today, I guarantee you those bookshelves collapsing would have all been CGI. Whereas within The Mummy, those bookshelves falling down are actual bookshelves falling down on set. And I just found myself really appreciating that. It's a very small scene, you know, it's a very silly scene. But just through Rachel Weisz's performance and just how it was done, and you could just tell it's being done live on set, it was like, wow. I really miss this type of filmmaking, and like I said, look, it's a very small moment, and for a lot of people it might be a very sort of small aspect to pick up on, but for me it kind of highlighted a lot of what it was I appreciated about this film. There's also a couple of nods towards the Terminator movies in this film as well. You've got that one line, he never eats, he never sleeps, and he'll never stop. And it's sort of, it kind of takes you back to sort of that kind of what they were aiming for originally with the movie when they were writing this film. And they did want the Mummy itself to have that kind of sort of the Terminator approach to it, where it is this unstoppable killing machine. And even though you don't quite, like, you get it, but it's definitely not the sort of like that kind of the approach maybe originally that they were going for, which is more leaning into the horror aspect maybe. And, you know, that is perhaps something that I perhaps wanted a little bit more of when it came to the movie, even back as a kid. But like I said, I've always enjoyed this film. It's fun, and I feel like I enjoy it more now than I ever have. So I found by revisiting this movie after so many years, it's been a while since I've seen it, I found myself really appreciating it in a different way. Like, don't get me wrong, I've always enjoyed this movie. Like I said, I loved it as a kid. But I just found myself really appreciating this movie sort of from a technical perspective and just how this entire story and world was brought to life. You know, tonally it works really well. The actual romance aspect of the story with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, that's actually really kind of growing on me. Yes, it's really cheesy and corny, but it's what Stephen Sommers was aiming for, and he balances it out really, really well when it comes to the tone. I'll always remember back as a kid that I wanted more of the horror. Like, when you think of the Mummy, you always think horror, and I'll always remember as a kid being sort of slightly disappointed by that aspect. But like I said, as I've grown older, and sort of as the film has grown older, and sort of as I've looked back on it, like I said, I've just found this kind of new appreciation of the film and what it was they were attempting to do with it. It is a good time, it's entertaining, and it's also, if you're into filmmaking, from a filmmaking perspective, I found it to be quite intriguing as well, due to sort of the different elements that's being used to sort of bring the story to life. So yeah, like I said, enough rambling on from me. I will be giving 1999's The Mummy a 7 out of 10. So yeah, there are my thoughts on Stephen Sommers' The Mummy. But what did you guys think? Have you seen the film before? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you agree or disagree with what I've said? Or have you not seen the movie before, and has this review made you want to go and watch it? Then please let me know below, and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future movie reviews from just some random Welsh geek rambling on, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. My next movie review will be for the new release Longlegs, which is released this weekend. I'm really looking forward to checking that out. And there will also be a review for In a Violent Nature, another horror movie that I'm really looking forward to. But Longlegs is going to be the first one that I'm going to catch this evening. And another thank you to my most recent subscribers. It means an awful lot that there are people out there who do want to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film and pronounce things in very kind of cringy ways. But yeah, that's me. So yeah, it means an awful lot. So yeah, enough rambling. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be catching you guys soon.